Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really complex and, frankly, unsettling situation unfolding right now in South America. We're diving into how Ecuador's intense fight against international drug cartels has led to some chilling allegations of state-sanctioned disappearances. We'll be looking closely at the data, the ongoing investigations, and most importantly, the real people caught right in the middle of this national crisis. The sheer speed of this transformation, it's absolutely staggering. Not too long ago, Ecuador was widely celebrated as one of the safest countries in all of Latin America. But today, it ranks as one of the deadliest. You might be wondering why the sudden shift. Well, violent drug cartels from all over the globe, from Mexico all the way to the Balkans, have aggressively moved in to secure highly lucrative cocaine trafficking routes along the Ecuadorian coast. This influx has just completely shattered the nation's peace. Faced with skyrocketing homicide rates and a completely terrified public, President Daniel Noboa took decisive action. He essentially pinned his administration's hopes on incredibly heavy police and military deployments across the entire country. The strategy was simple: meet cartel violence with overwhelming state force. However, this sweeping crackdown has brought with it a wave of terrifying new allegations regarding how these forces are actually operating on the ground. Now, President Noboa's government is plagued with accusations of severe human rights abuses. And the most alarming of these? Allegations of enforced disappearances. An enforced disappearance isn't just someone casually going missing. It's the abduction or imprisonment of a person by a state military or political organization, followed by a total refusal to acknowledge the person's fate or whereabouts. It essentially strips individuals of all legal protection and leaves their families completely in the dark. And this brings us to a really heavy number, 51. According to an exclusive interview with Acting Attorney General Leonardo Alarcón, the state currently has 34 preliminary investigations underway. That represents 51 forcibly disappeared victims just since early 2024, right during the peak of these heightened military operations. Alarcón insists the cases are progressing, but notes they must be conducted rigorously to present compelling evidence to a judge. But for the families, that bureaucratic process feels agonizingly slow. Behind that cold statistic of 51 are real families living in an agonizing limbo. Take a listen to this quote from Rosario Villon. She says, "It gets harder every time my nephew asks when his father will come home, and I don't have any answers." Rosario's brother Jonathan has been missing for over a year and a half. These aren't just case numbers on the desk. These are families pushed to the brink, holding vigils, and begging the government for answers. The disappearance of Jonathan Villon. Let's actually zoom in and look closely at Jonathan's case to understand exactly how these disappearances are allegedly playing out on the streets. So, who is Jonathan? He's a 31-year-old father of three from the Neva Prosperina neighborhood in Guayaquil. On December 9, 2024, he didn't set out to do anything dangerous. He simply vanished while going out to pick up groceries. The totally mundane nature of his last known activity is exactly what makes these operations so terrifying to the locals. Anyone, it seems, can get caught up in the dragnet. Now here is a surprising and deeply troubling fact. The military officially declared they had 0 operations in that area on that date. 0. But the evidence tells a vastly different story. Security cameras clearly show soldiers patrolling Jonathan's neighborhood. And even more damning, a neighbor's mobile phone video captures the exact moment soldiers forced Jonathan into the bed of a municipal truck, hiding him under a wooden bench before driving off. The family even managed to record the truck's license plates. You'd think with video proof and license plate numbers, this would move quickly, right? Well, the investigation has hit a massive wall. The Ministry of Defense is reportedly refusing to respond to requests about Jonathan's case. Fernando Bastias, a lawyer with a human rights nonprofit representing the family, pointed out that Jonathan's case is completely paralyzed by the military's blatant refusal to hand over the information requested by the prosecutor's office. It's a total institutional stalemate. Tragedy of the Malvinas 4. Just 24 hours before Jonathan went out for those groceries, another horrific event unfolded. And this is the case that eventually pierced the military's shield of absolute denial. Looking at this timeline, you can really visualize the terrifying momentum of military operations that week. On December 8th, 4 Afro-Ecuadorian boys, ranging from just 11 to 15 years old, were walking home from playing football. In their neighborhood of Las Malvinas, they vanished. Just one day later, Jonathan Villon was taken. It paints a really grim picture of intense, rolling sweeps through these neighborhoods. And once again, we see a familiar pattern. Initially, the military claimed they played absolutely no role in the boy's disappearance. But just like with Jonathan, technology brought the truth to light.
Surveillance footage eventually surfaced, clearly showing Air Force officers forcing these young boys into the bed of a truck. The initial official narrative was just demonstrably false.
The reality of what happened to those boys is deeply tragic. The burned remains of the Malvinas Four were eventually discovered in a remote area called Tarija. It was a devastating realization for the parents. Luis Arroyo, who lost his sons Ismael and Jose, said they had been lying from the start. At first, they never hit them, they never tortured them, but after the investigations, then they changed their tune. For these families, it's an immense betrayal of public trust.
The fight for accountability. The sheer brutality of the Malvinas Four case sparked massive national outrage across Ecuador, and it actually led to an incredibly rare legal outcome for the entire region.
At the trial's conclusion in December 2025, 5 of the soldiers who participated in the boys' disappearance actually cooperated with prosecutors. They admitted to beating the boys and leaving them naked outside the city, and they received sentences of 30 months. But here's the crucial part. The 11 soldiers who refused to cooperate and maintain the cover-up, they were hit with sentences of over 30 years in prison.
This conviction is a complete watershed moment. As Camila Ruiz Segovia from Amnesty International points out, this is huge, not only in Ecuador, but in Latin America. It is not normal for the military to get convicted for enforced disappearances. Human rights groups are really hoping this landmark conviction acts as a strict deterrent against future violations. But while the Malvinas Four families finally saw a day in court, the fight for the remaining families is far from over.
Despite that huge breakthrough, a wall of silence remains for dozens of others. Investigative journalists from Al Jazeera reached out to both the Ecuadorian military and President Noboa's office regarding the broader allegations of the 51 forced disappearances. And nothing. Neither has responded. This total lack of institutional transparency means families like the villains are fighting a one-sided battle, stuck in this agonizing state of limbo without the cooperation they so desperately need.
So, what does this all mean? I want to leave you with this haunting question from Jonathan Villon's partner, Yadira. She asks, "We have the evidence. We have videos. What happened to my husband?" It's a powerful, unresolved question that cuts right through the politics and the broader drug war. It serves as a stark reminder of the 51 families still waiting in the dark, demanding that the state finally answer for the shadows it has cast. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep your eyes on how this situation in Ecuador continues to develop.